the winds speak louder on the cliffs. It is said that the gods favor high places, where sky meets stone, and silence is given space to echo. And tonight, we return to one such place. Welcome to Tales for Tired Eyes. You are listening to Letters to Khemu, a soft-spoken sleep series inspired by Assassin's Creed Origins. These are the memories of Bayek of Siwa, Medjay, father, seeker of peace. Each week he writes a letter to the boy he lost, a child of dreams and questions, whose name still drifts like dust in the desert wind. If the story echoes in your soul, leave a mark as the Medjay once did, and subscribe to my channel so you can return to walk with us again next week. Now breathe deep, let your eyes close, and listen as we return to the edge of the world. The cliff is still here, unchanged, unmoving. Halma Point, that high, jagged ledge above the great oasis, where the sand yawns open beneath the sky and the world below turns small enough to vanish. Bayek stands near the edge now, his boots pressing into the old stone, his robes drawn tight against the desert wind. It's cooler here than he remembers, sharper, the kind of air that carries questions with it. He kneels slowly, lowering himself onto the same worn rock where he once stood with Khemu. The sandstone bears no memory of the boy, no footprints, no echoes, only Bayek's own breath, steady and low. He draws the parchment from his satchel, unfurls it with care, and rests it on his knee. The view below is endless. Palm groves, scattered villages, the flicker of torchlight near a distant caravan, all of it seen from above, as if the gods themselves were watching. Bayek does not look down. He looks ahead, at the horizon, at the dying sun, at the place where memory begins again, and slowly he begins to write.
My son, I have returned to Halma Point. The same stones, the same view. And though the world below continues without you, this place, this cliff, remembers. And as I sit here, the wind carrying dust into the folds of my robes, I find myself drifting back to that day. The day the oracle asked for an ibex pelt. And I took you with me into the hills. You were 12 then. Still all knees and elbows, your voice caught somewhere between boy and man. The sun that day was soft, not yet the full burn of midday, but the golden light of early morning, when the shadows are long and the sand still cool. I remember how you kept skipping ahead, pretending to be the tracker. The ibex went this way, you shouted, pointing at the sand like a seasoned hunter, even though the only tracks you were following belonged to a goat from the village. I humored you, because your spirit was bright, because it reminded me of how my father once walked beside me, long ago, before I bore the badge of the Medjay, before grief had ever found a home in me. You asked me that morning if the ibex were sacred. I told you everything was sacred if you looked long enough. You thought about that in silence for a while. Then you asked if that meant camels were sacred, and if so, why they always looked so. You paused, searching for the word. Judgmental, you finally said. I nearly tripped laughing. You had a gift for saying things that cut right through the noise of the world. Truth, served with a crooked smile and eyes that missed nothing. I told you camels were sacred because they looked judgmental. That maybe the gods had given them that face to remind us not to take ourselves too seriously. You thought that was the cleverest thing I'd ever said. You repeated it 3 times. Camels are sacred because they look like they're judging us. You wanted to carve it into the stone circle. I told you the gods might smite you for desecration. You said Hathor would probably laugh, and maybe she would have. There was always laughter between us. Even when we were hunting, even when I was teaching you to move with silence, you would trip over a root or stumble on a rock, then freeze like a statue and whisper, "That was stealthy." And somehow I could never stay stern. Even then, even in the middle of a lesson, you would find a way to make joy rise from the dust, like a bird taking flight. We followed the path of the ibex quietly after that. Or at least I did. You had all the subtlety of a sandstorm. But you were trying, and that mattered more. I remember how the hills curved around us like the body of a sleeping god. The brush, dry and tall, the stones warm beneath our feet. You crouched beside me at the rise above the watering hole, peeking over the edge like a jackal pup. There they were, 6 of them gathered by the water. Graceful, still, unaware. And you whispered, that breathless kind of whisper that isn't quiet at all. How do you know which one to take? I pointed to the male at the edge, the leader, the one with the twisted horns and calm eyes. He watches the others, I told you. Take him and they scatter. You didn't speak for a moment. Then you asked something I did not expect. Does he know? I turned to you. Know what? That we're here, that he's going to die. There was no fear in your voice. Only wonder. Sadness, maybe. You watched him as if you hoped the ibex might look up, might lock eyes with you, might understand that you were sorry. I wanted to tell you not to feel sorrow for prey, that it was the way of the hunt, that survival had no room for softness. But I didn't, because in that moment, Khemu, I remembered my own father, his silence, his steady hands, how he never told me to kill without thinking first. So instead, I answered you honestly. I don't know, I said. Maybe he does. Maybe that's what makes him strong, that he watches, even when he knows. You looked at me like I'd given you the whole world. I didn't deserve that look. I never have. Then came the moment. The arrow knocked. The draw. You held your breath. And I let mine go. The shot struck clean through the heart. The ibex fell without a sound. The others scattered, a rush of limbs and dust. You didn't cheer. You only sat back, watching the body, and said quietly, I don't think I could have done it. I remember resting a hand on your shoulder. You didn't pull away, but you didn't lean in either. I wanted to tell you that was fine. That courage doesn't always live in the draw of a bow. But I said nothing. And that silence, I carry it still. We wrapped the ibex in cloth as the sun began its slow descent. You helped tie the cords, your fingers clumsy but eager. There was a quiet pride in you then, not from the kill, but from having shared the moment. We walked in silence for a time. The hills sloped gently toward the valley, and the golden light turned copper, then rust. Khemu flew above us in slow circles, never too far. You called up to her twice, just to hear her call back. And then, without turning, you spoke. Your voice was low, as if afraid the air itself might judge you. I don't think I'll ever be brave like you, Baba. I stopped walking. You didn't. You kept going a few paces ahead before you realized I was no longer beside you. You turned, not meeting my eyes. I remember that moment clearer than the shot I took. Clearer than the kill. Clearer than anything. There you stood, my son, my little shadow, with dust on your cheeks and doubt in your chest. And I realized something then, Khemu. You were not afraid of animals. Not truly. You were afraid of failing, of not being enough, of falling short of the legacy you thought I carried on my shoulders. I wanted to crush that idea beneath my heel, to kneel before you and say, I am afraid too every day. But I didn't. Instead, I asked you to follow me. We took a detour, one you didn't question. And soon, the brush began to thin, the stones grew sharper underfoot, and the sound of rushing water reached our ears as the oasis came into view from above. Halma Point, the place where my father once led me, where I too had doubted myself, where I stood, afraid, on the edge of becoming something more. You had never been there before. I remember the way your eyes widened as the land fell away beneath us. The valley stretched out like a painted scroll, the water below catching what little sunlight remained. You looked at me then, and I said it simply, jump. Your brow furrowed. You thought I was joking. When I didn't smile, you took a step back. That's far, you whispered. I nodded. I told you what my father had told me, that all men carry fear, but those who leap, those who trust the wind, they learn to fly. You stepped to the edge again, sand shifting beneath your feet, and you hesitated. I told you the fall was safe, that I had done it, that my father before me had done it, that the water below would catch you. But your hands were shaking. Your jaw was tight. You turned to me and said something I've never forgotten. What if I trust the wind and it forgets me? And I had no answer. Your voice cracked when you said it. Not from weakness, not from childishness, but from something older. A fear with roots deeper than the cliff we stood upon. What if I trust the wind and it forgets me? Gods, Khemu, I have heard the cries of dying men, the silence of widows, the roar of blades through blood, but no sound has ever carved me open the way those words did. You wanted me to tell you it would be all right, that no wind would forget you, that no fall could harm you, because I, your father, your shield, had said so. But I did not. I stood there, too proud, too caught in the ritual passed from father to son. My father did not hold my hand when I stood upon this cliff. He watched me, let the wind take me, and I thought I must do the same. So I crossed my arms and said only, "You are ready." You weren't, but you wanted to be. You took a step closer to the edge, toes curling over sun-warmed stone, fists clenched at your sides. You stood there for a long time, the wind tugging at your tunic, the water shimmering below like some divine mirror. Then, quietly, you stepped back. I can't. You looked ashamed, as if you had broken some sacred vow, as if not leaping made you less my son. And I let that silence stretch. I let it hurt you. When I finally placed my hand on your shoulder, your body flinched. Not from fear, but from expectation. You expected disappointment. And that is the cruelty I live with. Not that you failed to leap, but that I failed to catch you when you stayed still. You were never a coward, Khemu. Cowardice is silence in the face of injustice. It is turning away from those in need. It is inaction when action must be taken. You were not guilty of that. You simply needed more time. A gentler voice. A father who had known that the wind does forget, sometimes, but that love never does. We stood there, on the edge of that cliff. You small beside me, your hands still trembling from the weight of not jumping, And then, the scream. It tore across the cliffs like a spear loosed from a god's hand. Sharp, young, familiar. Chensira. Your head snapped towards the sound, and before I could even speak, you are already stepping back, eyes wide, face pale. I remember the hawk-like scream of Khemu from above, as if she too understood something sacred had been broken. The moment was gone. I told you, ordered you, to go home, to find your mother, to stay safe. I said it like a soldier, like a Medjay barking orders, and you listened, even though your eyes didn't want to leave mine, even though your feet lingered for just one more breath. You hesitated, and in that hesitation, Khemu, I saw everything you carried, your guilt, your doubt, your need to make me proud. I should have held you, just once more, should have placed my forehead to yours, and whispered what I truly meant. You are brave, you are enough, even without the leap. But I didn't, because I believed there would be time. A night to talk, a day to return, 1,000 more hunts beneath 1,000 more suns. Instead, I turned away, and the wind changed before I could call you back. Now I sit where you stood, the stone still warm beneath me, the wind still wild in my ears, and the water below, just as I remember. It has been years, Khemu, but the valley does not change. Perhaps the gods meant this place to remain untouched, so that those of us who return must face the echoes we left behind. I have looked over this cliff 1,000 times since that day, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in waking, and always, always I see you there, on the edge, arms stiff at your sides, your breath shallow with doubt. And I think to myself, if I had just said one more thing, if I had reached out, if I had stepped beside you instead of standing behind, if I had leapt with you, would it have changed anything? Would you have returned to your mother that night with light in your eyes instead of a storm in your chest? Would you have run faster? Hidden better? Would they still have found you? I do not know, and that not knowing, it is a blade I cannot sheath. But I know this now. You did not need to leap. Not then, not ever. You already had courage, Khemu. It was there, in the way you asked questions no man could answer, in the softness you showed to even the smallest creature, in the way you faced your fear, even when it held you in place. I did not see that then. I mistook silence for weakness, but silence can be strong. Stillness can be sacred. I wish I had told you that. I wish I had told you that you did not need to follow in my footsteps. You were not born to leap from cliffs, but to climb mountains no one else dare touch. And I would have waited forever for you to find your own wind. The sun is setting now. That old golden light, the same one that lit your face on the day of the hunt, now stretches long across the cliffs, casting the valley in quiet fire. Senut is silent above me, watching, waiting, and I find for the first time in years I am not afraid to remember. That day did not end the way I hoped. You never took the leap, and for too long I let that unfinished moment become your story. But that was never the truth. You didn't fall, Khemu. You stayed with your fear. Faced it, spoke its name, and I have come to believe that takes more strength than any dive from stone to water. You taught me that, even in your silence, you were teaching. And now I must learn to listen, so I will keep writing to you, not because I seek to erase what happened, but because I want to remember all the parts that didn't. The laughter, the questions, the moments we shared before the shadows found us. I will write of the stars we named, the gods we wondered about, the dreams you whispered to the wind when you thought I wasn't listening. You are not forgotten, my son, not by the stones, not by the birds, not by me. Sleep well, little hawk. I will return when the valley is quiet again, when the stars look down with kinder eyes, and I will write once more, with fire beside me, and your name in my hands. All my love, Bayek.